Yeah, I think the hardest part for me was not feeling like people understood where we were coming from when we said, well, God said so, or we at least believe God said so, so we're gonna move in that direction. The hardest part was people thinking that we were being reckless with our children, like, and you're gonna take the kids and all like, and or reckless with like, what God has given us and steward us in terms of like having bought a home and all that. Or that people felt like I was abandoning them. I think that even crushed my heart. It was like as if I was out to leave people. Um, because I wanted to. I felt a certain type of way, like, and I was really trying to communicate the whole time, like, it has nothing to do with our lifestyle, with our friends, with our family right now. It has nothing to do with um being discontent, like you said, or wanting a bigger home or wanting more land, or it had nothing to do with any of that. It literally was like we really feel like this is what God's asking us to do, and for people to look us in the face and be like, yeah, nah.
Yo, welcome back to the Vibes Daily Podcast. This is episode 2 of our series this year that we have titled Trustworthy, where we have really been diving into scripture and its understanding from what we're kind of calling an apologetic perspective, really our defense of our faith and what we believe. If you haven't had an opportunity, I encourage you to go back and check out our first episode where we invited a couple friends of ours, Justin and Natalie, to share their story from atheism to being an apologist, really, and defending their faith and their journey there. That was a phenomenal story and testimony. I encourage you to check that out. But today I am back in here with my wife, Victoria. And it's just the two of us here on the podcast, kind of like it was a little bit last year, and no guest, and kind of doing something a little unique as we're going to share our story. A story we've talked about or referred to probably often over the years, not just on our podcast, but in our church, and conversation we've had for now almost the last 4 years or so, as we're coming up on that 4-year anniversary of this moment. And we'll share a little bit.
4 years.
Yeah, 4 years. So we'll share a little bit about that. But I guess just for a little bit of context, one of the challenges when it comes to having a conversation about our faith, right, is that it's one thing to believe that the words in the Bible are true. We talked a little bit about that last month, right, and just believing the Old Testament stories like Noah and the Ark, or understanding evolution and how that fits into scripture, or the age of the earth, some of those things, right? It's one thing to defend that, but I think one of the biggest challenges when you come to accept that the scripture is truth is that you also then have to accept what it tells you to do.
Yeah.
Right? You have to accept how it impacts your life. And I think one of the big challenges often in a journey with faith is coming to that realization that if I believe that Jesus lived and I believe what he taught, that he said what he said, and that he did what he did, then I have to now come to terms with, okay, do I follow him?
Yeah.
And actually make those decisions, right? And I think even for believers, as followers, we have to kind of come to face with that, believing that Jesus is Lord and submitting ourselves to his will. And so that's kind of a little bit of what we'll talk about in that journey for ourselves, and how we've kind of played that out in our own lives. And story is kind of similar to one of the ones we've been reading here lately with Abram and his story. And so, don't have much of a format. We're kind of just going to chat a little bit, share our story and kind of how we remember it. But I'd love to just invite you start back in April of 2021. That's kind of when this journey kind of started. And the journey we're referring to, of course, is our move here to South Carolina. And tell me a little bit about kind of what you remember about that season, and maybe what either God was saying, what was happening, kind of before we got clear instructions.
Yeah, I think looking back at that time, I think we were just grateful, right? Like we had purchased our first home. It was like less than a year, right? Or was it a year?
It'd been a little over a year.
A little over a year at that point. We had purchased our first townhome. It was brand new. We were settled. We were grateful. We were in the middle of pandemic though. And amen to the surpluses that started coming. And so we were comfortable. I remember being comfortable. I remember we were starting like some Bible study groups at the time. And my sister had just moved from LA to closer. So it was like my brother, my sister, and my parents. Like we were all like 20 minutes from each other. Like I think we were comfortable. We had our community. Another guy had like placed on our hearts this concept of Vibes being more so like a coffee shop more than anything. So we were planning and making plans for like, okay, we'll just try to fast and pray. And we knew he was saying something about like, let's do church as like a lifestyle community. And so I think we were just even looking at places in Corona, right? I mean, we saw that place in Corona. We were starting to pray. It was creepy though. The place was so creepy. Yeah. I was not gonna walk up on it, but we would drive by and pray about it and talk about it. I'm thinking like maybe this might be a good place to just open up a coffee shop and maybe do some Bible studies out of it. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we had 3 kids at that time, right? Like Naomi was 3, Blake was 2, and Noah had just turned 1. Or he was about to turn 1. If you're saying April, he wasn't even 1 yet. And yeah, I don't know. We were just young, spry, and comfortable.
I don't know about young and spry.
I was young and spry. I don't know about you. Just talking about yourself.
Yeah, no, I probably was already feeling aged. But yeah, no, I think that's a good call out. I mean, I don't know if you recall, we had already talking about kind of the coffee shop. We had already had the LLC.
Yeah,
we had opened the business account for it. We had had a mailing address kind of down the street for it. And we had met with some people who had done some coffee shop stuff and kind of gave us some ideas there. And like we were, full steam ahead to kind of trying to, do this side ministry at this coffee shop, in that season. And they said definitely not looking to be anywhere else other than kind of where we were in Southern California, where our community was, our family was. And I really kind of enjoying that. And I think like that's important a lot to the story, because there wasn't really like a dissatisfaction or a grass is greener type of like perspective where we were looking elsewhere for something. I think the only like real challenge that I had felt in that season was specifically just kind of with the American church as a whole, right? I think that was a time we had read Letters to the Church by Francis Chan. And that was a really challenging book. It was a book I finished in like 3 days. I just was so struck by the questions that he asks. So if you're unfamiliar with the book, I mean, his writing as a whole, I just always appreciate that it's not so much like, let me tell you what to do, but more so, let me just show you some scriptures and have you consider what they say. And like, what do you think about this? Like, how does it kind of make you feel? And where do you feel like we fall? And so that was probably like the only thing that like, as we were reading, I just kind of felt like, there's more that God could ask of us and desire of us, but like still no belief that would happen anywhere other than Southern California.
Right.
Where we were. And we're very, very content. And I mean, really kind of all got shaken up with one dream. One night. So just, I guess I can tell this part of the story. I wake up, or let me describe the dream. I have a dream. And in the dream, we moved to South Carolina. I think my parents moved to like North Carolina, and your parents moved somewhere else in the South. Like it was just like we were all leaving California and moving somewhere in the South. And it was just weird. It was just different. At the time, we had one person that we knew that was already en route to move into South Carolina. But in general, had zero association with South Carolina. And so I wake up and I feel like it's a weird dream. I kind of just tell you about it and say, hey, this is a weird dream that we moved to South Carolina. And you were reading something that morning.
Yeah.
What were you
Yeah.
reading?
And I thought it was interesting because you don't dream a lot.
At least I don't remember them.
You don't remember them at least. And so when you dream, I always like listen or lean in. And so when you told me that dream, I did keep taking it into like real consideration because that very morning, like you mentioned, I was in my prayer closet reading the story of Abraham. So literally Abram at this point, but Genesis chapter 12. And I don't know why, and I had read this story countless times, but I don't know why I just kept getting stuck at the fact that he up and left his family, his land, to this foreign, unknown place. And I just couldn't move past it. And I was just like, Lord, you really ask people to do that? Like, what would it look like? And I remember thinking in my mind, what would it look like to like literally get up and leave everything? And so when you came down, and said South Carolina, I'm geographically challenged. I was like, where is South Carolina? Yeah, turn the map the right way. Where is South Carolina on the map? And it was like literally the opposite end of the country.
Yeah.
We don't have a single person that we know out there, right? No family, no friends, no job, nothing. I couldn't even tell you what the capital was.
Yeah, which we found out later. But like, I think for me, and I've said this, and this is home now, so like, this is no shade. But my only association, I'm an African American Studies major, right? Like that was my degree at Morehouse, and like, all I really associated South Carolina with was slavery.
You right.
Like, more slaves than any other state in this entire country. I mean, literally the whole 3/5 compromise that was created was because South Carolina had more slaves per capita than like people like other people. I mean, slaves are people too, but like others, right? And so like South Carolina wanted representation in government for all the slaves they had. So they came up with this 3/5 compromise that slaves were 3/5 of a person. Like, this is the kind of stuff I remember that I knew at this time. So full transparency, South Carolina was on a short list of like 3 states I never wanted to live in.
Yeah.
Like, that I wanted nothing to do with.
Because I was real nervous.
Like, nah, man, like, I'm good.
Real nervous.
So yeah, I was not again, and I was ignorant to to it as a whole. But what I did know of South Carolina, I was like, no, that's not exactly the place. But that's what we kind of heard. It was very interesting. Now, we both processed that very differently. Because at one point we just feel like we consider like, well, do you think us like asking us to go to South Carolina? And we were like, oh, like that. And so you were like, let's sit and pray and let's rest, and maybe we fast and we see what the Lord's going to say. And like, was it the same day or next day? It was very soon.
I had the kids in the car at Home Depot getting boxes, extra large boxes, because I'm like, we gotta move. Like, that's one thing I do not play with is the Lord. Like, you already know, if the Lord say so, oh, you're not gonna catch me not obeying.
Yeah,
because that's a recipe for disaster. We've seen this in scripture, how this goes when people don't obey the Lord.
Which we also know that just because the Lord said to do something didn't necessarily meant right now, this moment.
I was being on the safe side. I at least had the boxes. The heart
is ready.
The heart was there.
Yeah, I was not quite so ready. Despite the fact that it was my dream, I was not ready immediately. I didn't like the idea. And I think I could be honest and say I grieved the idea. It was interesting because I think the way we processed it, I think my grief came earlier.
Yeah, my grief came late.
I grieved it. I loved what I was doing. I was working at, full time in ministry and loved the job I had. It was a job that I felt, valued and appreciated, and felt like I was making an impact and doing some things. I felt like, particularly through the pandemic, it was a season that like had a lot to do with kind of keeping things, going in some ways, and trying to keep pastor's vision and execution and those kind of things. That was a lot of what I appreciated and enjoyed. And I had only really been in full-time ministry since I finished college. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like I had a short stint as kind of a teacher. But like even then I was still doing ministry at the same time, and like ministry was kind of all I knew as an adult. And so the idea of like moving across the country without a job and without a resume that like spoke to anything outside of working for a church full time, like that scared me. You know what I mean? We're a single income household, you know, and like I don't know what that's going to look like to go out there and get a job. And then we had just bought this house
and a car,
we had just bought a car as well at the end of 2020, August in 2020, and you know, just all these things that like, well, we were leasing it, but still we were paying for it. And so there was a lot that I grieved our community, a lot of kind of what was going on. And so I want to know for sure.
Yeah.
I want to know for sure that like if we're going to do this, because moving is a lot. I hate moving. I moved a lot in my lifetime. I hate moving. If we're going to do this, I need to know that the Lord was behind it. And he commanded it. So yeah, it was a little bit of a process for me to kind of process it. Why were you so quick to just be ready to go?
I think, you know, that's in my nature, right? That like I am the quick hop to it, make a plan. I think plans excite me, right? Where I can make a plan and execute it, get it done. And like, I'm always on board quicker. But when the dust settles, like you said, I'll be like, wait, what did I just do? What just happened?
Yeah.
And so I think this is it was good to see this. Like, I think we needed both. Like, we needed my urgency. We needed your contemplation, right? And because you rested us so that we ended up fasting and praying and took some time. But to me, also the burden really wasn't on me. I was not the provider of our family, right? Like, and although God is the ultimate provider, like you still bear the weight of that. You had to change the jobs. I just had to put the kids' schoolwork in the backpacks and we just had to go. But yeah, and you had a lot of difficult conversations to have that I just, other than my family and friends, I did not have to have those conversations. So I think it was a lot easier for me. It seemed a little bit exciting, and like I said, I just don't like to be outside God's will. And so we fasted, we prayed, and it seems like every time we turned around, something was pointing to like Abraham. Abraham showed up in Family Life Today podcast. We just happened to be in a series at church that pastor was doing.
Yeah, Hebrews 11,
the Hall of Faith, right? And so everything that we turned to, just random YouTube messages that we was just watching, like had something to do with like Abraham or great faith or taking this leap of faith. And so as we were fasting, praying, and considering, I don't know, just it just kind of was like, okay, yeah, like you have to do this. Put your money where your mouth is. Like faith without works is dead. And we just kept coming back to that point. Like, yeah, like we had to respond to the prompting. Like if we really had faith, not just ponder and consider it, not just, oh, I might have heard, or not wait for everything to line up before we take the leap. Like that was the hard part too, because we didn't even have all the answers for everything. And eventually we'll talk about later, like we didn't have the answers for people either. Like people were looking for certain answers for us to have and how we know this is going to be a secure move, and we didn't. And so as we were even just contemplating what it would take, there were some pieces of the puzzle that we didn't have.
Yeah. Which, like, I think the scripture that stuck out to me, because he said we were in Hebrews 11. Pastor Curry was preaching Hebrews 11 for like 3 straight weeks. We were in a series called Greater, I remember. And Hebrews 11:6, which says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. Yeah. Was like the one that just really like punched me in the chest, because it was kind of like, you know, as you said, you were much more quick to kind of be like, all right, we're gonna go. That for me, it was like, man, it doesn't matter how hard I work at this church. Like I can be in full-time ministry, serve every week, every day, you know, give 50 to 60 hours a week sometimes, depending on what was going on. But if I don't have faith, he's not pleased.
Yeah.
And like That almost made me cry. Like, it was kind of like, man, like, if I am unwilling to trust you in something like this, then, like, I can't please you, or it's impossible. And, you know, I think you know this, and I say it, I don't know if there's anything I want more in this world than to please God.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I want at the end of this life, is that God looks at me and just says, like, well done.
Yeah.
My good and faithful servant. This is my son with whom I'm well pleased. Like, that's what I want to hear. And so I'm like, man, that's hard. And I think that led to, as you mentioned, just kind of some of the hard conversations we had to have, because I don't think people understood. Like, as much as we've always been in church and around church people, Christians, followers, you know, of Jesus, whatever word you want to use, what we were doing was still unprecedented. Like,
for our group.
Yeah, at least for, you're right. At least for the people we were, like, it was just still like, it did not make sense. So, like, talk to me, like, what was the biggest challenge for you? Like, in those conversations, maybe, and maybe the plans, anything, what was the hardest part for you?
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me was not feeling like people understood where we were coming from when we said, well, God said so, or we at least believe God said so we're going to move in that direction. The hardest part was people thinking that we were being reckless with our children, you know, like, and you're going to take the kids and all that, like, you know, and or reckless with, like, you know, what God has given us and steward us in terms of, like, having bought a home and all that. Or that people felt like I was abandoning them. I think that even crushed my heart. It was like as if I was out to leave people because I wanted to. I felt a certain type of way, like, and I was really trying to communicate the whole time, like, it has nothing to do with our lifestyle, with our friends, with our family right now. It has nothing to do with being discontent, like you said, or wanting a bigger home or wanting more land, or it had nothing to do with any of that. It literally was like, we really feel like this is what God's asking us to do, and for people to look us in the face and be like, yeah, nah, like, and people, like you said, who raised us, or who grew up in the church with, or you said who were Christians, and we were all supposed to be following God. It was really hard for us to be like, oh, well, y'all super Christian, or y'all trying to be super, and I'm like, there's nothing super about it. Like, this is obedience, like, and we're trying, and we're not perfect at this at all, but we're at least gonna try, like, and it seemed defeating, because I think a lot of the comments throughout the time, even till when we were leaving and on the road trip, was like, you know, just because we were driving, it was just like, why you guys want to drive? Like, it's dangerous, and we kept getting all this pushback, and so just not feeling the support that in doing God's will. And I can understand, because God does not speak to everyone, right, about what He's doing in your life. Even between us, his husband and wife, sometimes he'll tell you some things and he doesn't confirm with me, right? Or he tells me some things and, like, you haven't gotten the confirmation yet. And so we even see how hard it is in our own dynamic when God's doing stuff. But it was like, I'm sorry, I know God didn't come to you in a dream. Like, I know He did not put this conviction in your heart or tell you that what He was doing over here in our life. But although you didn't hear it, trust that we have heard from this God. Like, you have raised us, or we have been raised to be Christians and to hear God and obey God. And so this is what it looks like. Yeah. And it might be hard if you're not hearing the same things.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. I think what's probably hardest for me was more so that, like, a couple things. One, it happened quickly.
Super quick.
And two, people didn't know. Yeah. Like, because, at least for me, I didn't really share with many people until I knew for sure. Right? So I told you we're praying and fasting, and I'm like, just this idea potentially moving, I'm just like, I'm not even going to entertain her. Like, I had shared with Pastor Curry, you know, kind of the idea in you know, what we were praying about. And honestly, that might have been it. Like, that I can remember and recall that, like, we said this too. And so I feel like because of that and because it happened so fast,
Yeah.
I feel like we sprung it on people.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we say all the time, people who came to our going away party were like finding out that day that we were going away.
Yeah,
you know?
or from the invitation.
Right.
Going
like,
where?
Yeah, like they found
going?
out like days before, right? And so, and which I think just kind of probably brings up the other part of the story, because it happened fast, because I feel like once we said yes, everything thereafter just moved so quickly.
Yeah, talk about that.
Like we did some exploration, right? While we were praying, we did little stuff on like, all right, we've never sold a home before. What would that look like?
Yeah.
You know,
What would it take to sell it?
what would it take? We did a consultation with, a realtor from Redfin, and was just like, what would that take? And she just pretty much like, oh, I can sell this home tomorrow. Like, kind of thing. It was like, okay, we're not ready for it yet. Just like, we're still praying and considering, but excuse me, that's good to know. We had looked a little bit into like because we didn't know where in South Carolina we were going to go. I think we were originally thinking more like a Charleston area. So we kind of started looking into that area. Okay, what would that take? What would it look like? So we did a little bit, but we were still just kind of, God, like, I just want to be sure.
Yeah.
I think the moment to me that we said yes was when we listed our home for sale. Like, the moment that it was official was that Thursday. It was a Thursday after Mother's Day. And I'll never forget. It's a whole different story there with like my mom and her diagnosis kind of coming that very next day. But like, it was a Thursday after Mother's Day. And I was like, this is when it's like official. We listed it, because at that point, that was when okay, now I'm ready to start telling people, because like, we're getting ready to go.
Yeah. And that was like a month after we had the dream.
Yeah, so that's in April, right?
Yeah.
So Mother's Day is in May. So yeah, it's like a month later from the dream. So again, it was a couple weeks of fasting, a couple weeks of pray. And we were just like, all right, we're in. So we listed on a Thursday.
So like, hold on, timeline is we had a dream in April. Like 2 weeks later is when we started talking about like, hey, maybe we figure out what it takes to sell the home. By the next week, the lady was like, okay, I need to come do some photos so that I can prepare and see. Well, first when she came to just check out the home, right? And she looked around. She was like, yeah, it's in the bag. And then that next week, I think we had to like skip a week though, because something would like,
well, Mother's Day, they didn't want to list.
They want to list on Mother's Day. That's right. So we had to like skip.
It was like, it's like one of the few weekends that people don't actually see homes.
Yeah, because they're taking them.
They're like every other holiday people go shop, but for whatever Mother's Day they don't do. Which
yes,
that's interesting.
It was interesting. So it was like 2 more. So like, just to give timeline, like it was literally like a month and some change, like removed from the initial dream that she came out to do photos and put up the listing for the house, which was stressful with 3 kids. I'm like,
trying to get a nice looking house. Oh goodness,
turning up the stuff.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Toys.
That was definitely
toys away. And we had to be out the house for like significant amount of time. So I was like
hours.
So I had to try and find somewhere to go with the kids while she listed it or posted it. And, and we only had 1 weekend after that. The very next weekend.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get to that because I think like so. Back to some of the challenges about springing on people, because this is kind of where I was at. Like, we list Thursday. Friday morning, I'm having like multiple conversations, because like essentially one person finds out, that person reaches out to another person and pretty much says like, I hear Eric's leaving type of thing. And that leads to a whole like, that person's looking at me like, wait, why did you tell me you were leaving? I'm like, I tried in some ways, but like now it's official, whatever. And so that happens. And so like, I'm juggling now, like all of this on like a Friday. Again, we listen on Thursday. Now I'm juggling, like trying to like piece together who's finding out what and when, right? And again, like I said, it's just like we sprung it on people. In the midst of that, like one of the hardest things for me was, I told you, I really grieved like leaving friendship. And I had this vision in my mind that like I'd be able to work remotely for the church. Like, I had this whole like proposal I was gonna try to put together and kind of have this conversation about it and say like, what would it look like? And even if it's required a paycheck cut, like fine, but like what would it look like if I could do? Because a lot of stuff I was doing, editing, website, that kind of stuff, I could do anywhere, right? We did it during the pandemic. I was at home most of the time. And so, I was kind of having that conversation in my head. But like I never got the chance to have it prior to kind of like being put in a position to, you know, ultimately give a resignation notice and all those things to be clear on when I was moving and leaving. And so that was hard, man. Like, it was just hard to kind of be put in that spot to have to explain myself, but also, like, you know, be firm on, okay, this is like my last day, and not get a chance to kind of talk about, you know, those things that we have actually got to talk through, you know, kind of how I felt. But like at the moment, it was just really difficult. And but as God would have it, like there was this it was just kind of this beautiful moment that led to you know, work, and we'll get to that here. But to your point, that's Friday. We do 2 days of open house, Saturday and Sunday, and by Monday we had 3 offers on the house.
3 good offers.
3 good offers. I mean,
there's more than that.
Well, yeah, I don't know what else there was, but we had 3 that we were considering at least. And really one that was kind of like perfect. There was no contingency. They had all the money in the bank.
Yeah, conventional
loan. They had
loan.
a conventional loan. It was put 20% down. Like, it was just like one of those solid, it's not going to fall through. The only issue was they wanted a 30-day close.
They wanted a 30-day close. So we looked at each other and was like, well, I guess we have to move now.
Yeah. But this is the part that makes it even crazier. So 30 days from, again, this is like right after Mother's Day weekend, is essentially about Father's Day weekend. That'd be like, you know, a full month, because Mother's Day is the second Sunday in May. Father's Day is third Sunday in June. So about a month. The issue was we already had plans to be in Augusta for my cousin's wedding
Augusta,
on
Georgia.
Father's Day.
Yeah.
Augusta, Georgia, which is an hour from Columbia, essentially. Hour and a half from Columbia. So, like, we really had 3 weeks because we had to be out before. We weren't going to go all the way to Augusta and then come back to California. There was no way we were doing that.
Yeah.
Like, it just didn't make sense. And so we really had like 3 weeks from the time that they accepted the offer, or we accepted the offer, to be out of the house.
I'm glad I got them boxes.
Yeah, that made all the difference, babe. Having those boxes was the difference with us getting out. But we had 3 weeks to find movers or find a plan for moving.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of went through some stuff to book a route, figure out a route and how we were going to get there, to start telling people to schedule, you know, again, our going away. Like, we had 3 weeks.
Yeah, to ship your car.
Ship the car. I mean, one of the cars.
One of the
we shipped.
cars.
Yeah, like, there was a lot of things we had to figure out, but we had to figure out all of the moving stuff. And we had to figure out where we were going. And again, at the time, we were still considering like a Charleston.
We met with a realtor there. And
yeah, we had a realtor guy we had been talking to, and kind of looking at some of the houses there. And then you randomly had this word or city name.
oh yeah, I was in my bedroom next to the bed. I remember this vividly. And all of a sudden I heard Columbia. And once again, I had to get my map out. And I'm like, Columbia, is that a city in South Carolina? Like, where's Columbia?
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
Everybody asked me that, and I said, sweetheart, it's the capital.
Yes, I came down and asked you. I was like, I feel like I heard the Lord say Columbia, but like, is that a city in South Carolina? It's the capital, babe. I'm like, oh. So, I just really didn't do well in history, but it's okay. Well, I can memorize, but then I just forget after the test. So, you know, I got my A.
Geography. But
Got my, oh Lord, geography. See, y'all, if it's not the sciences, I'm lost.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we do that and we find out it's Columbia. And then we look and we see that Columbia is 40% African American, but then also has a bunch of colleges there. And we really wanted to do something like a college area ministry. And so we were like, oh, that aligns. But then we were like, okay, well, we're not really feeling this realtor anyways. Like, do we even have anyone? We just happened to have a friend from North Carolina who had a cousin who didn't serve Columbia, but had a friend who served Columbia.
Yeah.
And then we got hooked up with our like now bestie.
Realtor bestie.
Our realtor bestie. Who's like family now. But
yeah.
But it's so crazy how those align. I remember the first conversation we had with her, I was like, she's the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's a solid one.
So yeah, I think that's probably a good place to kind of like summarize some of these things, right? So like I said, we say yes. We list our home. We get 3 offers over the weekend, right? We get that yes in a 30-day close, and mind you, above asking price. Like this, it was above asking price. Like, so 3 offers. You get hooked up with, you know, our friend Sheena now.
Sheena Summers, if you need a realtor.
Yeah, there you go. We get hooked up with her, who gives us some ideas. And starts to look for us on homes out here. I told you about that day where essentially I was, encouraged to kind of give my resignation and got some clarity on that and on when I was going to resign. Well, that same day I remember sitting in my office at the church, like in my reading his email, just kind of distraught because I didn't get a chance to pitch my whole idea and all that on kind of being remote. I choose to reach out to a guy that worked with our church to help us set up our app and website and stuff, kind of help us to sell that. And I reached out to him. It was just like, hey man, I don't even know if you guys are hiring in South Carolina. I don't know if you're hiring at all. I don't know if you're hiring in South Carolina. I don't even know what you guys do, but like, I'm moving there. And if you guys have anything that's open I could do, like, I would love to work for you. And he's like, crazy. I just landed in Orange County, California with my boss. Like, let's do breakfast tomorrow. And so I meet with him. I meet with my now current manager, and they sell me on the idea of working for Subsplash and like, working in sales. And so like all of this is kind of happening in the weeks leading up to just even us leaving California. We haven't left California yet. Like these kind of things are working out. And it's just literally like one thing after another.
After the yes.
Yeah, just after the yes, right? Just things just kind of working out. So we say yes, we don't have a plan. But you said, to your point, when we leave, again, this is the weekend before Father's Day now. So it's the second weekend in June that last Sunday at the church, we have a party right after with our people, and we're leaving that night, getting on the road that Sunday night, so that we can be in Augusta by Father's Day the next weekend. When we leave, we're still telling people we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't have a house.
We don't.
We had put in offers on like 3 different houses and got declined on all of them because we had the contingency. We had to sell our house.
And people were buying homes like with cash.
At that point, 2021,
the
market was crazy. It was a seller's market. So you could pick their offers, right? So the same thing that worked in our favor when we got 3 offers in a weekend was working against us as we were trying to buy. So we still didn't have a house.
Nope.
All we had was an Airbnb for a month. That's all we knew. Is we was going to be in this Airbnb for a month.
Yes.
When we got out there. We did not have a job. Like I had maybe 1 phone interview with Subsplash prior to leaving, but like I didn't have a job. We were just getting on the road. And we're like, we're going to go and Lord going to figure it out. And, to summarize, just kind of fast forward, I'm interviewing for that same job. It's the only place I applied. I didn't know what else to do. I told you, fall back. If I didn't get hired here, I'm about to go work at Starbucks or something, be a barista. But we still had the coffee shop idea. So I'm like, I might as well go learn how to make some coffee.
Get some skills.
Do something. I don't know what I'm going to do, but we're going to figure it out. But we're doing interviews for that job on from hotel rooms and stuff. Like,
in the car sometimes.
One in the car at the park.
At the park. It was so hot. It was so hot outside. And you had this interview in the car. And I'm just sitting there looking to see if you was done yet. The kids, we Californians, we're not used to these extreme temperatures. Were we in?
We were in Charleston at that point.
Were we in Charleston?
Yeah, you guys were getting ready to take me back to the airport. Because I was flying back to California.
Yeah. And so we were in Charleston.
To finish up.
And child, when I say there were so many bugs and it was so hot, Naomi and I was having a hard time out there in the summer. It's summertime.
Yeah.
Ooh, it was so hot.
Yeah. And so we do that. And, but it was just so crazy. The day we get to South Carolina. We meet Sheena for the very first time. We had put in an offer from Augusta. We were in Augusta. We had put in an offer virtually, sight unseen on the house. But she had just done some virtual stuff for us. Put in an offer on that house. We get to South Carolina, and the first place she takes us is to see this house that we're in now, and then one other house. We had put an offer on this one, but had not. We were considering the other one. By the time we get to lunch, we're giving her our thoughts on the 2 houses.
This is like 2 hours after being in Columbia.
Yeah, we've been in Columbia a couple hours at this point. And, giving her thoughts on the houses. And she was just like, so about that first one, how do you actually feel about it? Right? I was like, yeah, it's cool. We like it. She was like, and then she was like, well, they accepted the offer, right? And so literally 3 hours in, 2 hours in, whatever it's been, we got a house, we'll move into it 45 days later, but we got a house. And then again, you guys take me to the airport that day. I fly out of Charleston. Y'all pick up your mom, and she comes and stays with y'all. And it was probably 2 days into being back in Cali that I got an offer from Subsplash, right? Full time to kind of be there. And so literally again, in this month's worth of time from listing our home to moving to South Carolina, you know, a house, job, like all that stuff has kind of worked out for us. And so, yeah, it was an amazing story of just kind of watching God work out the rest once we said yes.
Yeah.
Like, that's a bar. Sorry. But like, just like he really did. Like, once we listed the home and said, okay, God, like, we trust in you, and we're going to give up this house that we're in, and we're going to, you know, commit to moving and let you kind of work it out, man. He did. He worked out every bit of it. And it doesn't mean it was easy, you know, all the way. There was a lot of challenges still along the way. But I don't know. God has done a lot of things since then. But I don't know. What else kind of have you felt was like significant in that story? Some details there.
Yeah, I think it was just back to even when we got here, we went from a 3-bedroom townhome in Corona, California, to a 5-bedroom home in Columbia, right? And so I'm thinking that this is about to be plenty blessings. Mm-hmm. Like, this is just the beginning. Like, we about to level up. Like, we about to just be living. I mean, I read the story about Abraham and he was plenty blessed. Like, he had money. I'm like, oh, okay, Lord, I see what you're doing. And then I get settled in Colombia. And we get settled in, and because of just the loan that we had to do this time around, and you being a commission-based job, like, it wasn't plain money when we got in, right? True. Like, it wasn't just like bolstering amount of money because of this new job. We was actually like working your way up, right, and trying to ramp up in sales and stuff. And so between that and then just like the difference in lifestyle here, there were plenty of things that we just don't have. We don't have in Colombia that we had in California, especially like food options and choices and shopping. And then of course I started to grieve my family. And so, like you said, I was quick to leave. Yeah. But I struggled when I got here. Like, I had a lot of crying, woe is me moments. I mean, one of my friends, Tia, knows I was at the park. I had met her at the park as a friend. On the second time meeting up, I'm on FaceTime with my Cali friends, bawling. I'm pregnant. I don't know if we said that.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I don't know if we said that. I was 5 months pregnant.
This is why we're not moving anytime soon, because every time we move, you're pregnant.
Well, anyway, that didn't save you this time with Judah.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. Anyways, so I was pregnant when we were on the way out here too, and with our 4th child, and I was emotional, and it was really hard to adjust. And I said, Lord, are you sure this is where you're bringing us? Like, are you sure this isn't just a pit stop? Like, are we passing through to Charlotte? Because we went to visit Charlotte and they had some of the things that were like in Cali that was a little more familiar. And so I was like, are you sure you didn't say Concord, North Carolina, where they have a big mall in Cinnaholics? And he didn't. He said Columbia. And so as we tried to adjust, I mean, the kids took to it very well. They adjusted very well. And I think I struggled the most, although I was the first. And because I settled in, and then I realized I reread Abraham, and I said, oh, wow, there were years. There was years. I kept going back to Abraham. What did I miss? What am I missing here? And then I realized that it was years in between in his journey, right? And that his blessings just didn't just show up. And it wasn't just all great. Like, there was some tough times. And so even just knowing that, like, God had called me to endure some tough times was really hard to reconcile with, because in my mind, the only reason why you would call me out from California to Colombia was so that you could multiply my blessings exceedingly and abundantly. There should be nothing but blessings when I get here. But he has also promised us suffering in some tough times. And it was for my maturation, right? Like, it was to grow me. And it wasn't still clear what we were supposed to be doing. Yeah. Like, we thought we were going to come and start this coffee shop. Okay, let's get it going. And then he told us, like, stop, build my church. Yeah. And we're like, what? Like, we didn't even really come to, like, build a church. Like, and so we did. We started trying to figure out, okay, house church. Let's just have church here at the house and Mile the Acts Church. I guess that's what we're going to do. But there still wasn't a whole lot of clear direction. And even today, I feel like sometimes we sit back and we're like, okay, Lord, what are we doing? Now He's brought us community. We've done some things in our house church where we've made some connections that are just meaningful, and then we can say like, okay, Lord, I see why you brought these people to us and in our lives. But it definitely wasn't what we initially thought it would look like. But I felt like in general, the big story and the big takeaway for me is like, okay, one big leap of faith was not enough. That's not all that He asked of me.
Yeah.
Like, yes, it was great for us to take this big leap of faith at the beginning, but that's not where the story was supposed to end. Like, He was like, I need you to keep leaping. I need you to keep, bunny hopping your way through life, and just keep taking leaps when I ask you to.
Yeah.
And then don't waver once you get there.
Yeah.
And don't go back. Like, don't backslide, don't go back. Don't woe is me. Don't complain. Because my big thing is people used to ask me even at the store, like, oh, like, especially if I had to show my ID and it was still a California one, they'd be like, oh, you're from California. How you like in Colombia? And I'd be like, I don't. I had to be real straight up, like, because I was like grieving so much. I couldn't fake it anymore. I was like, I don't. And then God told me, I'm here though. So if I brought you here and I'm with you, how can you say that you're not in a good place? Like, how can you say that you're not enjoying yourself or you're not blessed or like, and I just said, yeah, like, Lord, if you're here, it should be enough. Like, you should be enough. Not how many targets are around. That one got me. It was 20 minutes for a target and just one target, 20-minute drive. I wasn't understanding. I just wasn't understanding the logic. But, the Lord was like, I'm bigger than Target and malls and shopping centers, like big shopping centers with plenty of restaurants. Plenty of restaurants.
Yeah. That we like. Yeah.
That we like.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, I think, you pointed out something, and again, going back to how we started this conversation, and I know we'll kind of bring it to a close because we could go all day on like the things that God has probably taught us since we've been here and some things that happened. But I think, part of what I wanted to just focus on today was just that decision and that move and just kind of that, because, one of the things we talked about even in church recently is that we don't get a lot of the emotion or the feelings of like what people experience in the Bible. Like we just see that Abram moved, but like we don't know how hard that was for him to leave his family, right? And the things that he might have wrestled through or felt. And, so hopefully kind of sharing some of that. But going back to, kind of how we started the conversation, I think this is the piece that, like, again, back to when you say yes to the Lord, when you accept Him, right? We are saying Jesus is Lord. That's part of that confession when it comes to salvation, right? It's you believe in your heart, that Christ, God raised Him from the dead, but you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, right? That's kind of that first part. And Him being Lord means He rules our life, right? He runs it. And that when He says go, we go. When He says stop, we stop. And I think, again, this is that hardest part when it comes to that faith and that decision to say, like, I am going to follow Jesus. It's one thing for me to believe He lived and existed. It's another thing for me to say I'm going to serve Him. Yeah. And I think that's what we ran into, which is, to your point, it's not just that initial yes. I can go and have an altar call and say, Lord, I'll follow you. But can I still follow you when it gets hard and when you ask me to do things I don't want to do? Or when you take me somewhere, when I show up there, it doesn't look the way I wanted it to look, right? It's not what I thought it would be. To your point, man, like even in Abram's story, like he didn't get like some beautiful land that he got there, right? Like, it was fine. It was a famine when he gets to Negev, and it's these things that he kind of dealt with and endured. And again, whether he's supposed to be there or not is a story for another day. But like,
he was in a tent.
Yeah, like he's pitching a tent. He's kind of doing those things, and so many stories we see that, right, where it just doesn't look like what you probably perceived it would be when God first calls you to it. And so, yeah, I think like one of the big takeaways has been, for me, like just persevering and enduring through whatever it is God has called you to do. And as you said, believing that it's still for His good. Like that's a piece we could go all day on, all the things God has done since we've been here. Yeah. It's not about us. Like, that's where I thought you were going to go, is like, we did move into this 5-bedroom house thinking we were going to live plush and lavish, and thinking we had space like to do all sorts of stuff in our house, thinking we had extra room. I remember having an interview or talking to my, she was my manager at the time. Now she's a coworker of mine, a peer of mine. But I remember when we moved into that house, because we were at the time at the hotel and I was working from like a remote office and one like a WeWork type thing. We moved into this house, my first day in the office. I remember telling her, like, I don't know what we're going to do with all these rooms. Like, we got all these extra rooms. We only had a family of 4 at the time or a family of 5 going on 6 at the time. I was like, we got extra rooms. We don't even need it. And it was like that weekend, one person moves in with his dog. The next weekend, somebody else moves into the house. And now all of a sudden we went from a family of 5 going on 6 to, 7 or 4 adults, a dog, 3 kids going on 4 kids, like in a matter of, weeks, really.
Yeah.
Like, it hadn't even been that long.
Yeah.
And I didn't even count kind of things that came thereafter, but like.
And my mom was in town.
And your mom was in town that particular time, right? So, yeah. But I said it to say, like, it was just, and there's so many testimonies that come out of those people being here, others that we've met along the way. So, like, I know there's a purpose for it, but yeah, I think that is, it's are you willing to endure, to stick it out, and not to just turn back and run and say, like, well, I'm going back, to the thing that felt more comfortable and felt like, I enjoyed it. So, yeah, I don't know. Any final thoughts? Anything that you'd want to share about like our story in moving that you just think is kind of for someone who's listening as like a, man, if you don't get anything else from our move.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add is, as we talk to people about our story, it surprised me how many other people out here, specifically in Colombia, had a very similar story. Like, we have met probably at least 5 or 6 other people who have said, yeah, I felt like God called me to Colombia too, and I just up and left. Or people who had a story of like, I just left in the middle of the night, got in my car with my kids. I drove as far as I could go on that tank of gas, and where I ended up was Colombia. And I think it's so interesting that, like, we aren't the only ones that got calls. And so even just from the standpoint of, would God ever call somebody to do this? I think the more and more we speak to people about it, we see that, yeah, indeed, like, he has called not just us, but many other people to just up and go and leave and take that leap of faith without all the answers. And he has kept them, right? Like, people now have homes and jobs, and he has kept them. I'm not saying there weren't any some tough seasons. There's definitely some tough seasons to bear through. But like, for anyone who is wrestling, right, with maybe hearing God asking you to do something that just seems big, it seems a little scary. It seems like, if you're like me, who needs all the details, like, you just don't have all the details for it. Like, would he ask me to go if I don't have A through Z? I only have A and B. Like, would he require that of me? Would he require me to leave my job if I don't have another one lined up? Would he require me to go and move somewhere if I don't have a house already lined up? If you know for certain it is God, right? And except for us, we determine that by prayer, by fasting, and then fact checking it with his word, right? Like, fact checking it, like, when we started looking at the Hall of Faith, Hebrews 11, and just looking for confirmations, God gave us confirmation left and right. And so if you're getting those confirmations from the Lord, and it's not just your own thought or desire, right, that just is to please you in your own heart, I think you'll see that, like, yeah, God does require this of a lot of people. It's not everyone's story, but if somebody, and it possibly could be you, like, this is something he might be asking, is to take this leap of faith. And then, as we've shared, it wasn't until we said that yes, and even, like you said, had some action behind our yes, not just a theoretical yes, but actually said, well, what would it take? Let's start lining up, like, researching what would it take, and making some movement, making some phone calls, sending some emails. What would it take? After we did that and put some action behind it, then the doors started opening. And lastly, it just doesn't matter what anybody else says. Like if you know that you know that you know that it was the Lord who sent you, or who is sending you, sometimes it's just going to be hard, and eventually we pray that they come around to understanding, and that your life will be a testimony and will help them understand and see God and His will a little bit better. So yeah. How about you?
I know you took them all. So
I
I don't have anything else to add to that.
Just kidding. I know you got something.
No, I don't actually. The only thing I was going to go back to 3 points before.
Oh goodness.
And just in share in general that, like, not even just God calling you to move, but I mean, there's plenty of biblical examples of things that God has called people to do that, like, you can just look at those and say, okay, there are examples of this modern day, right? Of, God just asking for things, again, don't make a lot of sense to us today. And there are stories of that. So, like I said, your thing may not be necessarily moving and going somewhere, but it may be, staying in a situation that doesn't make a lot of sense, versus leaving a situation. Maybe actually staying in one. It may be, giving away some things that, you feel like is your last to give away and you don't have anything left, right? Those kind of things. But but I think those are good points, and I think that's a good place for us to kind of end today. But again, I this is probably the longest we've sat and talked about our move kind of in one sitting. And so, man, pray that, again, no matter where you are in your journey, that this is something that's helpful for you to just kind of trust God with. And know that, one, as Victoria said, God still asks people to do things that He has spoken to in the Bible, but that, like, again, especially if you're on that verge of just saying yes and accepting God and accepting Jesus, that, like, it does mean you have to submit your life to Him. But I think there's nothing else that I would say. It's just like, it's absolutely worth it. It's worth every minute of it. I know Natalie and Justin said this last episode, right? Like, they wouldn't trade it for the world. They would never go back and do anything different. And I feel the same way. Like, no offense, I'm not moving back to Cali, at least not anytime soon, until the Lord tell me to go. Like, I'm not. I'd rather be here in His will and doing things the way that He's kind of asked of us than, to be somewhere that I feel like I'm comfortable or has the things that I want, per se. So, know that it's worth it. It's hard. It's a challenge, but there's just no better place to be than to be with the Lord. But appreciate you sharing your heart and your perspective and the story that, I already kind of knew, but it's just good to hear
our story.
Yeah, our story. And again, thank you guys for joining us today on our podcast. Come back and see us next month. We'll continue this conversation. I think we'll be probably close to Exodus at that point, if not already in there, and continue this journey through our reading plan. Visit our website, vibes.church. You can find more information about the reading plan that we're on. Follow along with us. Join our messaging groups community, our family. Join us for worship on Sundays.
The daily devotionals too.
Daily devotionals are posted there. Written devotionals with some reflection questions, as well as some other video resources that relate to the topics that we're talking about or reading that week. So again, I highly encourage you to check those things out and be a part of our community. But until next time, we appreciate you joining us on the Vibes Daily Podcast. Until then, take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Vibes Daily Podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the Vibes Church app.